Merry Christmas, everyone. I'd like to share a Christmas Day devotional with you. Of course, you can watch it anytime you want, and even not on Christmas Day if you want. A few years ago, I was pastoring a church that had quite a few staff members, and we had a staff Christmas party. And the staff Christmas party was on a Friday evening during December, and there was people in charge of food and people in charge of games and things. One of the games we played was a trivia game. And I remember they asked some trivia questions, and one of the trivia questions was something like, what relative in a popular Christmas song was run over by a reindeer? I got that one right off the bat because it was Grandma. And they asked some Christian trivia songs, like in the song "Oh Holy Night," how many times is the word night used? And the answer was 7, and they're all in the first verse. And the trivia question I remember the most, and I got it right too, was the one about Charlie Brown Christmas movie. And they asked the question, in the Charlie Brown Christmas movie, who quotes the Christmas story from Luke chapter 2? Here, Charlie Brown, hand that to me. See, now in the Charlie Brown Christmas movie, who quotes, and you know the answer too? Linus. Linus quotes it. So you put that one back. And Charlie Brown is very upset because of the materialism of Christmas, and because for the whole Charlie Brown family, he blew it by picking a skinny little aluminum tree that wasn't any good, and he didn't do a good job of it. And he's very discouraged, and he throws up his hands and he asks, what's the meaning of it all anyway? And at that point, Linus is there, and he's got his blanket with him, and he steps up to the stage, asks for the spotlight, and then he boldly says, I know the true meaning of Christmas. Charlie Brown, I know it. The true meaning of Christmas is, and then he quotes, in those days Caesar Augustus issued a decree, but he starts with, and there were shepherds living out in the fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks at night. An angel of the Lord appeared unto them, and the glory of the Lord shone around about them, and they were terrified. So let's stop and look at the shepherds part of the Christmas story this morning for our devotional. After all, they were the ones that were supposedly keeping watch over their flocks in the hills nearby where the baby Jesus was born. You probably noticed that I have my own I had a lot of visual aids today, but one of my visual aids is my shepherd boy. And Mason is playing the part of the shepherd boy, and he's doing a good job, and he'll be handing my visual aids to me. And at all times, just look toward him when you want to know what, Mason, what was it like that night? Was it really bright?
It was very bright.
Were you real scared?
Really scared.
Oh, okay. And when the angel spoke, how did you feel about that?
I felt amazing.
Amazing. That's good. Well, God has an amazing plan, and he has a wonderful way of doing things that include common folks like me and like you, Mason, and like the ones that are watching. The inclusion of the shepherds on that magnificent holy night brings us to the fact that they were not the main people in society at that time. There are some observations we can make about this. The shepherds were men of the field and not of the city. So you're right to be wearing a cowboy hat. Because the shepherds in the story about Christmas, they remind me of like the stories of the cowboys of the Old West. Hand me that tin can there, see. Now when you think about the stories of the cowboys from the Old West, they're always drinking old coffee, 12-day-old grounds out of a tin mug like this. They always have their cowboy hat. They're maybe sitting around a fire, and they maybe have a one-string guitar or something like that. And they're singing old ballads about love's lost, faithful dogs, the life of a cowpoke, or just about the lonesome sky, maybe. And they're worried about the cattle, in their case. You can put that back. In this case, the shepherds were worried about the sheep. And when the shepherds had to go into town, they probably only sent one representative shepherd. and the rest of them stayed with the sheep. And so they were men who were on the fringes of society. Everybody knew about them, but they didn't come in. A lot of them didn't come into the marketplaces or anything like that. They would not have been shopping for Christmas presents at the Walmart. No, if they came and got Christmas presents, they slipped into the dollar store between 5 and 6 o'clock just before it closed. I even doubt that would have happened. Of course, there'd never been any Christmas yet, and it was that night that these Bethlehem shepherds, who smelled like the field and were about as dirty, they were out there keeping watch over their flocks by night when, like Mason said, an amazing light shone. They were terrified, it says, scared out of their wits. And it was very bright, and a loud voice declared that today Christ is born, and he's the Savior for the world. And they sang, glory to God, and peace on earth, goodwill to men. So they were men of the field and not of the city. And second, they were probably temple shepherds, because these sheep that they were raising there were too close to Jerusalem. The only reason they would have been in Bethlehem area, about 4 miles from the temple, is because they provided the sheep for sacrifices, and these had to be perfect sheep. So no shepherds would have stayed in that area except that they were providing sheep for the sacrificial system in the temple. Now, if they provided a sheep that was blind or had a fault, like a broken leg or something, it would not have been accepted. So to make money, they had to be some of the best shepherds in the world. Here's my best shepherd in the world, right here. He raises perfect sheep, because that's what they have to be used for the temple. So I think that their contemplation of what this night meant came to fruition in God choosing them to be the ones who would get to view this little God promise in swaddling clothes, lying in a feeding trough or a manger. He was the perfect lamb, Jesus, that would put them out of business, but they did not care. They rejoiced, praised, and glorified God. Think about that. So now the next thing we look at is God chose these shepherds, like Shepherd Boy Mason here, to be the witnesses of the birth of the Christ child. Hand me that gavel. Nice. Well placed. So the judge calls the courtroom to order. He swears in a witness. I've had some pictures that I didn't use, but here's our, if you can see these, here's our cowboy. Represents a modern shepherd. Here's our shepherds from actually in Bethlehem and their sheep. Here's an old movie where they're swearing in a witness, to be a witness. And she's taken the oath. So at this moment, what is a witness? Let's think about that. Witness in a courtroom. They have to tell the truth, and they have to not be impaired, and they have to report accurately what they saw and or heard. And it's also important that they've not been paid or swayed or biased as to what they will give as their testimony or record of events that they witnessed to in the court. God picked these shepherds to be the witnesses of what would occur here. He did a pretty good job picking them, I think. Where would God find such objective witnesses for a poor boy's birth to a Galilean couple only passing through the area due to a census or taxation? Who would even observe what happened in a stable behind an inn in the middle of the night in a tiny town like Bethlehem? Shepherds would. Would he wake the innkeeper and his wife or some sort of other travelers that were packing that place? Would he bring people out from the big city of Jerusalem? He'd have to wake them up and they'd be all sleepy, and they wouldn't be reliable witnesses like these shepherds. I doubt they'd even know what was normal or abnormal for anything that may occur in that little place set aside for animals. I know. How about the priests? Bring out the priests. God will get the priests to come, right? Nope. Do you think they would have been rejoicing that they were going to go out of business? No. How about the king? Same thing. He wouldn't be rejoicing if it was he was going to go out of business. How about the Romans? The Romans were supposed to keep the peace, quote unquote. Weren't they in charge of everything and could have cared less about Jewish stuff? So they'd be objective, right? All true, but this is why they wouldn't have a clue of what they were reporting on or what its significance was. God chose the shepherds who were keeping watch over their flocks by night. God felt that they would be perfect witnesses and that they would tell the truth of the events of the holy birth of God. These are those that watch at night. That's their job. They're wide awake. These men know when they see a baby wrapped in strips of cloth, it's the custom of wrapping the dead and not the newborn, and it's very unusual. So these men know that you do not see a baby child being laid in a manger used for feeding the animals. And these men hear the angels and believe God's message. They know the meaning of what they saw. And these men, in God's opinion, would be the perfect witnesses of God's holy birth for all eternity. If someone asked you to tell the truth, would you tell the truth?
Yes.
I know you would, because I know you, Mason. And you are very much like those shepherds. And they would tell the truth. They had no reason not to. And that's why God picked them.
Yep.
Wasn't that cool?
Yes.
Amazing, wasn't it? Amazing. Last of all, the angels were the heavenly announcers of his birth. You can put this back here. I remember when my children were born. Now, I'm so old that when my children were born, we didn't know if they'd be a boy or girl before they were born. True. That's true. So there I was, the father, waiting, find out, is it a boy or is it a girl, first of all? Are they okay? Are they healthy? What's going on here? What's going on in there with the mother? The father wasn't in with the mother in those times very much. So when they told me, there wasn't cell phones, internet, none of the modern technology. So we had to get on the real phones. And we had to call and we had to tell people and tell everybody else and we had to go proclaim it. First thing I'd do is get myself a bubble gum cigar that was blue. And I'd give these out. So having gone to the store, I couldn't find a bubble gum cigar today. But I did find bubble gum Big League Chew. And this one looked like this would be for a boy. So I proclaimed to the world, we've had a baby, and it's a baby boy. I'd have a cigar. This is a tiny little non-cigar cigar, but something like this. And I would hand one out to everybody because I'd be overjoyed to tell them. I can put these back. And that is exactly what God chose. The angels were the heavenly announcers. They announced from heaven that Christ was born. But the shepherds were the earthly announcers that God picked to go out into the countryside in the middle of the night proclaiming, Christ is born. The Messiah has come. So, I have a picture or two here. It was their job to go announce, it's a boy. Here in the next picture, we have a picture, that microphone there. I hope the visual aids are helping you. This man was elected last year the Broadcaster of the Year. So he's the Broadcaster of the Year around in the USA, and it gives his name and all that. And his job is to broadcast. So he tells news. He reports the news, and he reports it as accurately as he can, hopefully. And he reports the news that the Messiah has come. But in this case, God picked the shepherd boy, or the shepherds, to be the announcers. That's very cool. Now, the women were all back in their bed, but they weren't able to get out of bed for 3 days. Now, the dad had the job of telling everybody by phone. Then they started putting phones in the room with the mothers. And, of course, they could tell their mother, and that's what they wanted to do. But the women care about the details. The dad cares about he had a boy, and his name is Mason. And he tells all that. But the woman, here's what she'll tell. Not only that, but how healthy the baby is, that it has 5 fingers and 5 toes, what its weight is, what its length is or height, the exact time of the birth, the blow-by-blow account of everything that happened in the 18 hours before the baby's born, and how the baby has a tiny wrinkle in its forehead, and all these details like that. I should say at the present time, this could all be done in one text message or one email to the whole world of all of your friends. But announcing is still a very important adventure, even though the means have changed greatly. As Christians, it's our job to announce there's hope for the world, and it's Jesus, and Jesus has come. The shepherds were chosen by God to be these earthly announcers, and they were not just saying it's a boy, but not just any boy. The hopes and fears of all the years are met in thee tonight, is a line from O Little Town of Bethlehem. Apparently they did a pretty good job announcing, going and telling it on the mountain, over the hills and everywhere, that Jesus Christ was born. Since all who heard them, it says in the scripture, were amazed, and even Mary herself treasured up all these things in her heart and pondered their full meaning. So I want to tell you a story to close. It's about a lady near the end of her life. She was in her 80s. Her husband was already gone. And she had to move out of her home. She could no longer have a driver's license. And she could no longer live independently in her own home. Her kids lived far away. And she was placed in a nursing home. When she moved to the nursing home, I'm holding this up. I'll get to this in a moment. When she was placed in the nursing home, she had to sell the house. She had to sell almost all of her furniture and belongings. She could only take one closet full of clothing and a little dresser full of belongings. Eventually, she got sicker, and whatever illness she had progressed, and she would need to be moved to the hospital. When she moved to the hospital, they left her things at the nursing home for a while, and after 90 days, she was moved to a long-term care facility. In the long-term care facility, she could only keep a couple changes of clothes and a couple of personal belongings. So one of the personal belongings she kept, and she had a little window, she kept a manger scene, a nativity set. And it had the shepherds, the wise men, Joseph, Mary. Eventually, though, she had to go back in the hospital, and this time she was going to be in the hospital very much. Put these 3 over here. She could only take one thing with her, so she told them to bring Joseph and Mary and the baby. So here she had Joseph and Mary and the baby from her nativity set. She kept those beside her bed, where her glasses were. Few other things that she had. And the last 2 days before she was going to die, they had to move her to ICU. They left the mangers there. They said, did she want to take anything with her, like her glasses? And she said, put these back.
Okay.
She said, I'll only take this from the nativity set, baby Jesus. And they asked her, why will you only take that and not your glasses, your teeth, other things? And she said, because if you have Jesus, you have everything. I don't want you to forget that this great Christmas Day, 2022. My little shepherd helper, you put that back in place over there. And together, we're going to tell them, help me tell them, if you have Jesus, you have everything. Okay? Let's go. 1, 2, 3. If you have Jesus, you have everything.